Soul Streaming Entry 15. What about the inner teenager? A living, breathing audio and written experience by Sim. When survival became second nature, I wasn't just growing up, I was holding shit together. I was the teenager who knew how to manage a household before I knew how to rest. The one who watched younger siblings while adults were working, absent, or surviving themselves. The one who learned early that emotions had to be controlled, not expressed. That you don't ask for too much when resources are thin. That you stay sharp, stay useful, stay quiet enough, and not create more problems. Most of our parents were never taught how to identify or express their own feelings. They were taught to survive, to push through, to provide, to keep moving. So we were often told to stay in a child's place while being indirectly and subconsciously assigned adult responsibilities. Responsibilities that either repeated their own history cycles or were placed on us because they didn't know how else to hold what they were carrying. A lot of parents are so wrapped up in their own conditioning around what being a parent is supposed to look like, providing, working, sacrificing, reshaping their own histories by giving more physically than they ever received. And I can see that now. I can honor that now. But emotional presence was still missing at a time crucial to my development. Guidance around feelings was still absent. No one taught me how to process what I felt or name what was happening inside me. Shit, or even around me. So I learned on my own. I became my own container because there wasn't space for my emotions to exist anywhere else. I didn't learn how to live. I learned how to survive. And I learned it the best way I knew how. The weight that didn't belong to me. I swallowed my truth long before I had language for what truth even was. I learned that speaking up came with consequences, that naming what I saw disrupted the system. So I adapted. I became hyper independent, hyper focused, hyper aware. I learned how to carry weight without showing strain, how to handle things alone so no one else had to, how to make myself smaller emotionally while taking on responsibilities that didn't belong to me. And a lot of us didn't even realize we were choosing that. Part of us knew we were adapting to our environment and to our guardians based on what was shown and what wasn't. But another part of us willingly absorbed what wasn't ours to hold so we wouldn't add more struggle to the room. So we became the stabilizer, the regulator, in many ways, the parent. We learned how to censor ourselves, how to walk lightly, how to manage our presence so it wouldn't feel like a burden to the people we depended on. What no one talks about is how that kind of independence leaves you exposed. When you're used to doing everything on your own, you don't notice when people start leaning too hard on your energy. You don't notice when support turns into siphoning, when care turns into dependence, when being capable turns into being consumed. I didn't just not know how to protect myself energetically. I was never taught how to return to my core, how to check in with my own capacity before offering it away, how to recognize when helping cross the line into self abandonment. That lack of grounding shows up in real ways. Saying yes when your body is already exhausted, feeling responsible for other people's moods, being the one everyone vents to but rarely checks on, over explaining yourself so no one feels uncomfortable, staying longer than you should in conversations, relationships, or environments because leaving feels like failing someone. Confusing empathy with obligation, confusing loyalty with self neglect. I learned to read people quickly, to anticipate needs, to shapeshift depending on the room. That skill kept me safe, but it also left me unprotected. It made me vulnerable to energy vampires, to relationships that fed off of my stability while offering very little in return, to environments that mistook my resilience for endless capacity. Because when you're disconnected from your core, your boundaries don't feel like boundaries. They feel like threats. And by the time you realize you're depleted, the pattern is already familiar and formed. I wasn't a child who needed soothing. I was a teenager who needed someone to say, I see how much you're carrying. I see you. You shouldn't have had to figure this out alone. Instead, I internalized the weight. I learned to regulate myself in silence. I learned to dissociate without leaving my body. I learned to perform strength so well that even I forgot it was a performance. And by the time I reached adulthood, everyone thought I was fine, capable, grounded, together. But what they were seeing was a teenager who never got to put the weight down. I'm here to be acknowledged for the years I survived carrying the weight, for the truth I swallowed to keep things functioning, for the energy I learned to manage alone, for the phases I thought I outgrew, for the part of me that learned how to live inside responsibility before life ever felt like it belonged to me. And I'm still here, patiently waiting. And maybe that's why this part of us gets skipped so often. We know how to talk about the inner child. We know how to imagine a higher self. But the inner teenager lives in between, too aware to be comforted, too young to be empowered, carrying the emotional weight of systems they didn't choose, in bodies that learned early how to dissociate. To understand the journey fully, you have to listen to this voice too. Not to fix it, not to bypass it, but to finally let it speak. We talk a lot about the inner child on the healing or spiritual journey. The wounded child, the innocent child, the part of us that needed safety, tenderness, and protection and didn't receive it. Inner child work is about being held. It's about reassurance. It asks these questions. Was I loved? Was I safe? Was I allowed to exist without earning it? And for so many people, that work is necessary. It teaches softness. It teaches trust. It teaches how to receive care without guilt. But the inner teenager is different. The inner teenager isn't looking to be comforted. They're looking to not be minimized. That stage of life is where awareness turns on inside a system that doesn't know what to do with it. You're old enough to see what's wrong, to feel the weight of expectations, hypocrisy, and unspoken rules, but you're still powerless to change the conditions around you. That's where pressure builds. That's where anger, shame, and silence start to live in the body. The body keeps the in between. The inner child asks for safety. The inner teenager asks for justice. This is the phase where truth first gets swallowed to survive, where being too much becomes a liability, where intuition sharpens but isn't validated. And so instead of being soothed, the teenager adapts by hardening, withdrawing, or performing. Many people don't fracture spiritually as children, they fracture as teenagers. That's where self betrayal becomes strategy and independence becomes armor. And when that stage gets skipped, it doesn't disappear, it gets stored. It settles into the body. It becomes weight that you carry forward without realizing where it came from. You heal layers, you process memories, you grow awareness, but the body keeps the ledger. It keeps transmitting what was never fully metabolized. So even after all the insight, all the work, all the reframing, there are moments when something moves through me that doesn't belong to the present. It belongs to that in between stage, the years where I was aware enough to feel everything, but not empowered enough to put it down. Lately, I'm really beginning to understand why healing is not linear. No matter the theme, no matter how much work you think you've already put in, there are always layers. And in this season of my life, those layers haven't arrived gently. They felt like energy tornadoes moving through my body, pulling from different versions of me, especially from my teenage years. A stage of life that is often overlooked on a healing path when you're deeply self aware. I had to sit with myself and forgive myself for that, not because I intentionally ignored my inner teenager, but because other facets of me had to take precedence in order to survive the initiations I was moving through. And when I really look back, it makes perfect sense. Even before my teenage years, I was already emotionally aware. I already knew how to guard my energy. I already knew how to read rooms, manage moods, keep the peace. That wasn't my job, but it became my role. not out of choice, but out of survival. That's when shapeshifting became second nature, collecting data, adjusting, living many lives within the same body. And while that skill protected me, it also created an imbalance because the vibration of the environments I was adapting to didn't match my own. I could feel that imbalance resurface after I left Thailand. There was an undercurrent I couldn't name, a heaviness that didn't feel current but didn't feel imaginary either. At first, it showed up as anger, irritation, frustration, a deep sense of shock. I questioned myself, wondered if I had regressed. But the strange part was that it didn't feel like present day emotions. My body was reacting before my mind could explain it. Acne, weight shifts, digestive issues, physical changes that forced me into deeper lessons of self love and acceptance. I can't only love myself at my best. So I had to make room for self love while old energy breaks down quietly inside me, while things I thought were settled rise and move through. What I didn't realize at the time was that more suppressed memories were beginning to surface. Memories rooted in my teenage years and early adulthood. Not all at once, just enough at a time for my nervous system to hold. Because that's how healing actually works. You process what you're ready for, when you're ready for it, not when your mind demands answers, and definitely not all at once. Around the last full moon, everything intensified. I felt empty and overly sensitive at the same time. Like one part of me had cleared out, while another part came fully online. I felt plugged into every emotional source at once. And then, almost casually, I heard the words inner teenager. Not even in the context I'm speaking about now, but something in me lit up. The emotion surged. Not because something was happening in my life, but because something old was finally ready to be seen. That's when it clicked. For as much as I've worked with my inner child, this was different. This was the weight I carried as a teenager. The responsibilities, the silence, the acting out of beliefs that had already been formed long before I understood them. Childhood plants the seeds, but adolescence is when it starts to grow, when it branches, when it's shaped by peers, pressure, hormones, and unmet emotional needs. As a teenager, I learned how to manage intensity by disappearing inside myself, by staying quiet, by moving carefully. And when that containment started to crack, I reached outward, not always recklessly, but searching, testing, trying to anchor myself through connection, experience, sensations. Some of it helped, some of it blurred things further. What I didn't realize then was that I was trying to regulate a nervous system that had been holding too much for too long, without guidance or permission to slow down. Now, when I look back, I don't see chaos. I see information. I see a body that learned early how to carry awareness without support. And that's why the inner teenager matters on a healing path. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's formative. This is the stage where patterns move from emotional into physical, where coping becomes character, where what couldn't be processed gets stored. You can work with the inner child and aspire toward the higher self, but if this layer stays unacknowledged, the body will keep speaking on its behalf. A promise I won't break again. Through this unraveling of old dormant energy, I've been intentional about not rushing past her again. I've been spending time with my inner teenager, not to analyze her or fix her, but to be with her, to listen, to ask for forgiveness where I overlooked her pain in the name of survival or spiritual growth, to make a promise that she will never be skipped over again, that her experience matters, that her truth is not inconvenient, that she doesn't have to earn presence or prove how much she carried to be worthy of care. Under the snow moon on February 1st, 2026, I wrote intentions on a candle as an offering to her, not as a ritual to release her, but as a gesture to honor her. And almost immediately, I felt it, a softening, a sense of being held, seen, loved. She experienced a lot. She went through a lot. She carried a weight that was never meant to be permanent. And now we're here, at a place where what was once stored for survival can finally be set down. where that energy doesn't need to be transmuted anymore, but can rest with ease, with gentleness, with the knowing that it's safe to put the weight down now. My legacy thread. This work is part of a longer lineage repair. Not just mine, but the quiet inheritance passed down through teenagers who were asked to grow up too fast, who learned to read the room before they learned to read themselves, who were told to stay in a child's place while carrying adult weight behind the scenes. By naming the inner teenager, I'm interrupting a pattern that survives on silence. I'm choosing to acknowledge the years where awareness came online without support, where survival became skill, and where that skill was mistaken for strength instead of strategy. This is where the handoff happens, when the weight is traced back to its origin, and the body no longer needs to carry it forward. What rests now doesn't disappear, it integrates, and what integrates no longer needs to be carried forward. A whisper for you. If you're reading this and something in your body feels tender, pause here. Your inner teenager is not dramatic. They were perceptive. They were early. They were carrying more than they should have had to. You don't need to relive anything to honor them. You don't need to fix the past to be present with it. You only need to listen without rushing them toward resolution. Let them be seen. Let them rest. Let the part of you that learned how to survive awareness without power finally exhale. You're allowed to put the weight down now. Here are your journal prompts for this week. Answer them honestly. Number 1, what responsibilities did I take on as a teenager that were never explicitly mine? Number 2, where did I first learn to swallow my truth in order to keep things functioning? Number 3, how has hyper-independence protected me? And where has it quietly cost me? Number 4, what does my inner teenager still want acknowledged without being fixed or reframed? Number 5, what promise am I ready to make to my inner teenager that I intend to keep? Thank you for witnessing this soul stream. Replay it or reread it whenever you need to come home to yourself. Until next time, stay soft, stay true, and keep streaming your soul your way. Love, Sim.